Commander's Log 234. Timestamp 2837-12-15. Cycle 194. The hazard exclusion zone stretches before me like a wound in space, a vast expanse where wreckage from forgotten wars drifts endlessly, haunted by rogue factions, unclaimed relics, and strange spatial phenomena that defy reason. The only constant here is danger. And me. I am Commander Aiden Thorne, stationed aboard the Vigilant Sentinel. I volunteered for this solitary mission, though I'd be lying if I said I fully understood why at the time. Redemption? Duty? Maybe I just wanted to prove something. The Sentinel's sensors are quiet now, but silence in the Hez isn't a blessing, it's a warning. I lean back in the command chair, the leather creaking behind me. Around me, the Vigilant Sentinel's bridge hummed softly. Holographic displays floated in the air, projecting everything from local star maps to tactical readouts. "Nova," I said, breaking the stillness. "Give me a diagnostic." The AI's voice was smooth, tinged with faintly sarcastic lilt. "All systems nominal, Commander. Shields are at full capacity, weapons primed, and life support is, well, still supporting your life." "Funny," I muttered, scanning the displays. "You should try sleeping," Nova continued. "Studies show that human efficiency increases by—" "I'll sleep when I'm dead," I cut in. "That's an optimistic outlook for someone in the most dangerous sector of space," Nova replied dryly. Before I could respond, a sharp alert sounded. The holographic map flickered, a red dot pulsing at the edge of the Hez. "Distress signal detected," Nova reported. "Source?" "A Kelkor Coalition vessel, designation Aqualis. Signal strength indicates they're in trouble." I stood, the adrenaline already kicking in. "Plot a course. Let's see what we're dealing with." The Sentinel's engines roared to life as the ship turned, accelerating toward the signal. The Aqualis came into view a few minutes later, a sleek silver ship surrounded by an asteroid field. Its hull was battered, scorch marks marring the surface. "They're taking fire," Nova noted. On the display, 3 smaller ships darted around the Aqualis, their plasma weapons firing. Raiders, typical scavengers of the Hez. "Open a channel to the Aqualis." Static hissed before a voice broke through. "This is Diplomat Sirag Velos of the Kelkor Coalition. We are under attack. Request immediate assistance." "Hang tight, Sirach," I said. "Help is on the way." Nova chimed in. 3 enemy vessels identified. Light-class raiders, low-grade shields, moderate speed. The weapons won't breach the Sentinel's defenses." "Good. Let's remind them why this zone has a guardian." The Sentinel surged forward, cutting through the asteroid field with ease. The raiders turned their attention to me as I approached, plasma bolts slamming into my shields. "Shields holding at 98%, Nova reported. I locked onto the nearest raider, the targeting reticle glowing red. "Fire railguns." The Sentinel's forward railguns roared, sending a volley of hyperdense slugs hurtling through space. The first shot struck true, tearing through the raider's hull. It exploded in a bright flash, debris scattering. The remaining 2 raiders broke formation, trying to evade. "Cowards," I muttered. "Nova, predict their trajectories." "Done," she replied, marking their paths on the display. I fired again, the Sentinel's cannons blazing. Another raider went up in flames, leaving just 1. "Commander," Nova said, her tone suddenly serious, "the last raider is broadcasting a wideband signal, likely calling for reinforcements." "Let them come," I said, firing the final shot. The raider disintegrated, its signal cutting off mid-transmission. With the raiders dealt with, I turned my attention back to the Aqualis. "Diplomat Velos," I said over the comms. "Your attackers have been neutralized. How's your ship holding up?" There was a pause before Sirach's voice returned, calmer now. "We've sustained heavy damage to our engines and life support systems. We're dead in the water, Commander." "Prepare for a tow," I said. "Nova, deploy the gravitic tether." A shimmering beam of energy extended from the Sentinel, latching onto the Aqualis. Slowly, I began to guide them out of the asteroid field. "Why were you out here alone?" I asked Sirik as we moved. "We were conducting research," he replied. "The Hez holds many secrets, and the Coalition is curious." "Curiosity can get you killed out here," I said. "Yet here you are, risking your life to save ours," Sirak countered. I didn't have an answer for that. I brought the Aqualis to a relatively safe clearing near a drifting station wreck. As Nova monitored the surrounding space for any signs of reinforcements, I boarded the Aqualis to assess their situation. Sirak Velos met me in the airlock. He was taller than I expected, his aquatic form sleek and shimmering under the dim emergency lights. His large, reflective eyes regarded me with a mix of gratitude and wariness. "You're younger than I imagined," he said, his voice resonating softly. "Disappointed?" I asked. "On the contrary." The ship's interior was a mess. Panels were torn open, sparks flying, and the faint hiss of escaping air filled the corridor. "We've sealed the major breaches," Sirak said, "but the engines are beyond repair." "I can tow you to the edge of the Hez," I offered. "From there you can request Coalition assistance." "Generous of you, Commander Thorne," Sirak said. "But there's something you should know." I frowned. "What?" "We weren't just attacked by random raiders," he said. "They were targeting us because of what we found." He led me to the ship's research bay, where a large glowing artifact hovered in a containment field. It pulsed faintly, emitting a low hum. "What is it?" I asked. "We're not entirely sure," Sirak admitted, "but it's old. Older than anything we've encountered, and it was transmitting a signal." My stomach sank. "You brought a transmitting artifact into the Hez?" Sirak nodded. "We didn't know it was active until it was too late." As I returned to the Sentinel, my thoughts raced. The Hez was dangerous enough without rogue signals drawing more attention. I needed to get the Aqualis and its artifact out of the zone as quickly as possible. "Nova," I said, stepping onto the bridge, "prepare for a high-speed extraction." "Understood," she replied, "but I'm detecting multiple FTL signatures inbound." "Reinforcements?" "Likely," she said, "and they're not friendly." The holographic display lit up, showing a cluster of ships emerging from the void. They were larger than the previous raiders, their weapons bristling. "Battle stations," I ordered. The next few minutes were chaos. The raiders swarmed us, plasma bolts lighting up the darkness. The Sentinel's shields flared under the assault, but they held strong. "Target the lead ship," I said, locking on to the largest vessel. The Sentinel's cannons fired in unison, ripping through the enemy's formation. One by one, their ships fell, but more kept coming. "Shields at 74%, Nova reported. "Recommending evasive maneuvers." I gritted my teeth, piloting the Sentinel through the storm of fire. The ship moved like a predator, darting and weaving between attacks. "Nova, deploy drones," I ordered. A swarm of drones launched from the Sentinel, their weapons carving through enemy ranks. "Commander," Nova said, her voice urgent, "the artifact aboard the Aqualis is destabilizing. Its signal is amplifying." "Oh, of course it is," I muttered. In a desperate move, I activated the Sentinel's experimental gravity weapon. The ship shuddered as the device charged, a deep vibration resonating through the hull. "Gravity pulse ready," Nova said. "Fire!" The weapon unleashed a wave of energy, distorting space around us. The enemy ships were caught in the field, their hulls buckling under the pressure. As the last raider exploded, the battlefield fell silent. I towed the Aqualis to the edge of the Hez without further incident. Coalition reinforcements arrived shortly after, taking the damaged ship and its artifact into custody. "Thank you, Commander Thorne," Sirak said as we parted. "Your actions today saved many lives." "Just doing my job," I replied. As I watched their ships disappear into the void, I returned to the Sentinel, the weight of the day settling over me. "Commander's log 235, I said aloud. "The Hez remains as dangerous as ever, but for now, it's quiet. Let's see how long that lasts." Nova's voice broke the silence. Care to place a bet? I smiled faintly. Not a chance. Commander's Log 242, timestamp 2838-0203, cycle 212. The hazard exclusion zone is alive tonight, but not in the usual way. Reports of ancient warships, a ghost fleet, drifting from the zone's deeper pockets have reached me through Kelkor and rogue human channels. Ghost stories, they call them. Stories of automated vessels awakening from centuries of slumber, cutting through anything in their path. Stories like this shouldn't bother me, yet I'm here, tracking a distress beacon with the Vigilant Sentinel at combat readiness. Maybe it's curiosity. Maybe it's dread. Either way, something doesn't feel right. The beacon came into view on the main display, a faint pulse from a derelict battleship. Its once pristine hull was corroded by centuries of neglect, but its design was unmistakable. An old Terran vessel from the Galactic Wars, its silhouette jagged with weapon mounts and reinforced armor plating. That ship's been here a long time, I said aloud. Over 2 centuries, judging by its alloy degradation, Nova replied. Its reactor is still partially active, though. That's odd for a derelict. I adjusted the Sentinel's course. Let's find out why it's still kicking. As we approached, the derelict's distress beacon grew louder. Signal integrity degrading, Nova noted. It's automated, repeating the same burst. Assistance required. System failure imminent. Trap? I asked. Possibly, she said. Recommend caution. The Sentinel slowed as I brought us along the derelict. The ship's nameplate, barely legible through layers of grime, read TCS Indomitable. Fitting, I muttered. Nova, scan for life signs. Negative on life forms, she said. But there's movement. Drones, probably. Internal systems are active, though erratic. Some weapons are partially online. Oh, of course they are, I muttered. Would you like me to log your skepticism for posterity? Nova asked dryly. Not now, I replied, bringing the Sentinel into a defensive orbit. As I prepared a boarding maneuver, the derelict's weapon systems flickered to life. The automated turrets swiveled, locking onto the Sentinel. Target lock detected, Nova said sharply. Evasive maneuvers, I barked, gripping the controls. The plasma bolts narrowly missed the Sentinel, flashing past the hull and dissipating in the void. The next barrage wasn't as forgiving. The shields flared as they absorbed the impact, and the bridge vibrated with each hit. Shields at 82%, Nova reported. Return fire, I ordered. The Sentinel's railguns roared, striking the Indomitable's turrets. The old ship's shields, degraded over time, collapsed under the assault. Explosions rippled along its surface as the turrets were destroyed. Threat neutralized, Nova said. I exhaled, tension easing. Prep the boarding tether. You still going aboard? Nova asked. Whatever woke this ship up might wake up more, I said. We need answers. The Indomitable's interior was a tomb. I stepped into the airlock, my boots echoing against the metal deck. The air smelled stale, tinged with ozone from flickering lights. The corridors were cramped, their walls lined with exposed wires and rusted panels. Atmosphere is breathable, but contaminated, Nova said through my comlink. Limited oxygen reserves remain. Won't be here long, I replied, moving cautiously. As I ventured deeper, the ship's decay became more apparent. Doors hung ajar, conduits sparked, and long-dead drones littered the floor, their once lethal frames reduced to scrap. In the command center, a single console glowed faintly. I approached, wiping dust from the screen. The interface was sluggish, the ancient systems groaning under the strain of activity. Nova, link up and see what you can pull. Connecting now, she said. The console's screen flickered, displaying lines of corrupted data. This ship wasn't just a derelict, Nova said after a moment. It was a part of a fleet tasked with defending Terran colonies during the Galactic Wars. Its systems were set to hibernate after its crew evacuated, but someone reactivated it. Who? Working on that, she replied. The signal logs are fragmented, but there's a trace of modern coding. Someone piggybacked the original distress beacon to wake it up. My gut twisted. Why would anyone do that? Before Nova could answer, a shrill alarm blared through the ship. The console's screen went red, displaying a single word. Intruder. Drones poured into the command center, their spherical bodies bristling with weaponry. I dove for cover as the first shots sparked against the walls. Nova, I could use some help here. Working on disabling their control node, she said. I fired back with my sidearm, the plasma bolts striking true. One drone exploded, its fragments scattering, but more kept coming. Control node located, Nova announced. Sending a feedback loop now. The drones froze midair, their lights dimming. Thanks, I said, catching my breath. Don't thank me yet, Nova replied. The feedback loop is temporary. Recommend we leave now. Back aboard the Sentinel, I reviewed the data Nova had extracted. It wasn't much, but it was enough to confirm my fears. The Indomitable wasn't alone, I said. This ghost fleet is real. And it's being reactivated intentionally, Nova added. The coding is human, but the style suggests a rogue faction. Advanced, but off-grid. I frowned. Sirac might know more. Open a channel to the Kelkor Coalition. Sirac Velos appeared on the screen, his aquatic features illuminated by soft biolight. Commander Thorn, he said. To what do I owe this unexpected contact? I just boarded a derelict, I said. One of the ships from the Ghost Fleet you mentioned. It's not just a story, Sirac. Someone's waking them up. Sirac's expression darkened. This complicates matters. If these ships are reactivated en masse, they could destabilize the entire region. That's an understatement, I said. Do you have any intel on who's behind this? Sirac hesitated. There are whispers of a rogue Terran faction operating in the Hez. Their motives are unclear, but they've been linked to several high-profile incidents involving ancient technology. Then they're our best lead, I said. With Sirac's help, I tracked the rogue faction to a debris field deep within the Hez. The area was dense with wreckage, making navigation treacherous. Multiple signatures detected, Nova reported as we approached. Active power sources. Looks like a staging ground. Perfect place for an ambush, I muttered. Glad we're on the same page, Nova quipped. The Sentinel slipped through the wreckage, its stealth systems engaged. Ahead, a massive battleship loomed, its hull covered in scaffolding and repair drones. There's our rogue faction, I said. We docked covertly, sneaking aboard the battleship under cover of its automated maintenance. The interior was starkly different from the Indomitable. This ship was alive, its systems humming with power. As we moved through the corridors, Nova guided me toward the command center. Whoever's running this operation is there, she said. We reached the command center unnoticed, peering inside. A group of humans, clad in mismatched armor, worked at consoles. Their leader, a tall man with a cybernetic arm, barked orders. That's Commander Kale Doran, Nova whispered. The rogue leader? I asked. Yes, she said. Before we could act, an alarm blared. They've spotted us, Nova said. The next few minutes were chaos. Security drones swarmed us, forcing me to retreat while Nova worked to override their systems. You have a knack for making enemies, she said as I fired at the oncoming drones. Comes with the job, I replied. We fought our way back to the docking bay, narrowly escaping as the Sentinel disengaged. Back on the bridge, I stared at the display, my mind racing. We didn't get much, I said, but we know who we're dealing with. Nova's voice was cautious. Doran's forces are advanced. They're not just scavengers. They're building something. The comms crackled to life, interrupting us. Commander Thorn, a voice said. I froze. It was Doran. I don't know how you found us, he said, but you should know we're not enemies. The Ghost Fleet isn't just a weapon. It's a shield. Something is coming. Commander. Something far worse than you can imagine." His tone was calm, but it carried an edge of desperation. "We share the same enemy," Doran continued. "Think carefully before stopping us." The transmission ended, leaving me in silence. Commander's log 258. Timestamp 2838-0512. Cycle 243. The hazard exclusion zone continues to draw attention. What began as scattered factions probing its edges has evolved into full-scale scramble. Smugglers, raiders, and even research groups are flooding the Hez, each seeking the ancient technologies buried here. Today I intercepted a coalition transport carrying unregistered relics. Diplomat Sirac Velos claims they were preserving history, but others see it as theft. The Kelkor coalition and rogue factions are at each other's throats, and I'm stuck in the middle. I've been asked to host a peace summit aboard the Vigilant Sentinel. I don't trust diplomats. I trust warlords even less, but if this meeting fails, the Hez might devolve into open conflict, and I'm the one responsible for keeping the peace. The summit was a disaster before it even began. The Kelkor's Virtue, a sleek Kelkor transport, docked with the Sentinel early, carrying Sirac Velos and his delegation. Their arrival was unremarkable, but the air was tense. Sirac's features, usually calm, were drawn tight with suspicion. "Your guests will be arriving soon," I said as he stepped aboard. "And they won't trust us," Sirac replied. His reflective eyes scanned the hangar as if expecting an ambush. "You don't exactly trust them either," I countered. "That's because I know them," he said, his voice low. The rogue faction's shuttle docked next. Its crew emerged wearing mismatched combat gear, their leader unmistakable, Commander Cale Doran. Doran was broad-shouldered, his cybernetic arm gleaming in the Sentinel's sterile light. He carried himself with the confidence of someone used to winning battles, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion. "Thorn," he said by way of greeting, his voice gravelly. "Doran," I replied, stepping aside to let him pass. As the two delegations assembled in the conference chamber, the tension was palpable. Sirac spoke first, his tone measured but firm. "The Coalition has no interest in conflict. We seek only to preserve the artifacts within the Hez, ensuring they do not fall into the wrong hands." "And who decides what's wrong?" Doran shot back, his cybernetic hand resting on the table. "The Coalition? You've been hoarding tech that could save lives. My people's lives." "The technology in question is too dangerous to release without thorough study," Sirac argued. "While you study, we die," Doran growled. I raised a hand, cutting them off. "This isn't productive. The Hez is dangerous enough without factions tearing each other apart. We're here to find common ground." "Common ground?" Doran laughed bitterly. "Easy for you to say, Thorn. You've got the most advanced ship in the sector. The rest of us fight with scraps." Before I could respond, a deafening explosion rocked the ship. The Sentinel's alarms blared as I rushed to the command center. Nova's voice cut through the chaos. "Explosion detected in Docking Bay 2, she reported. "Kelkor transport compromised. Minimal casualties, but the ship is inoperable." Sirac appeared beside me, his usually composed face twisted with fury. "This was no accident. Someone sabotaged our ship." Doran joined us, his expression dark. "You think we did this? Who else benefits?" Sirac snapped. I stepped between them. "Enough!" "Nova, status report." "Blast originated from a concealed device aboard the Kelkor transport," she said. "It was timed to detonate shortly after docking. There's no conclusive evidence pointing to the perpetrators." Sirac turned to Doran, his voice icy. "Your faction has the most to gain from destabilizing this summit." Doran bristled. "We came here in good faith. If I wanted war, I wouldn't need a bomb to start it." "Both of you stand down," I ordered. "Until we have proof, No accusations. Nova, secure the Sentinel. No one leaves until we figure this out. The investigation was painstaking. Nova combed through logs, sensor data, and surveillance footage, but the sabotage had been meticulously planned. I'm detecting traces of an unfamiliar encryption, she said as I paced the bridge. Whoever planted this device is skilled, and they knew how to cover their tracks. Could it be one of Doran's people? I asked. Possible, but unlikely, Nova replied. This level of precision suggests a third party. A third party? The idea gnawed at me. If someone else was orchestrating this, their goal was clear. Chaos. The delegations were confined to their quarters, the atmosphere aboard the Sentinel tense. Sirac and Doran were each convinced of the other's guilt, and their accusations threatened to boil over. I found myself speaking to Nova more than anyone else. What's your take on this? I asked as I reviewed the latest data. Logical analysis suggests external manipulation, she said. But logic doesn't account for human and Kelkor emotion. You sound almost philosophical, I said, glancing at her interface. Perhaps I'm learning from you, she replied, her tone unreadable. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Nova intercepted a fragment of a transmission, its encryption identical to the device's. It's originating from the Hes, she said. Location? A derelict battleship, she replied. Coordinates uploaded. Time to pay a visit, I said. The derelict was massive, its hull scorched and pitted from centuries of decay. As the Sentinel approached, its sensors detected signs of recent activity. Power surges. Heat signatures. This ship's supposed to be dead, I muttered. Someone's keeping it alive, Nova said. We docked cautiously, my sidearm ready as I stepped aboard. The interior was a maze of dark corridors, flickering lights casting eerie shadows. Movement detected, Nova warned. The first drone attacked without warning, its plasma bolts lighting up the corridor. I ducked behind cover, returning fire as more drones swarmed. Disable their command link, I shouted. Working on it, Nova said, her tone calm despite the chaos. The drones faltered as she sent a feedback pulse through their systems. Control link severed, she said. Good work, I said, moving deeper into the ship. In the command center, I found the source of the transmission. A console linked to make a makeshift relay. Its interface displayed schematics of the Hes, marked with clusters of ships, factions, relics, and hidden caches. Someone's been tracking everything, I said. And manipulating it, Nova added. The encryption matches the sabotage device. I downloaded the data, but as I turned to leave, a voice crackled through the comms. Commander Thorn, it said, deep and distorted. I froze. You're meddling in things you don't understand, the voice continued. Leave now, or suffer the consequences. Who are you? I demanded. Your only chance at survival, the voice replied before the transmission cut off. Back aboard the Sentinel, I shared the data with Sirac and Doran. This proves nothing, Sirac said, though his voice wavered. It proves someone's playing us, Doran countered, and you're too blind to see it. Enough, I said. If we don't work together, we'll all fall into their trap. Sirac and Doran exchanged a long look before nodding reluctantly. As the summit resumed, a fragile truce formed between the factions, but the threat lingered, shadowing every decision. Later, as I stood alone on the bridge, Nova's voice broke the silence. You did well today, she said. Not good enough, I replied. We're still in the dark. For now, she said. But you're not alone, Aiden. Remember that. I glanced at her interface, her words resonating in a way I couldn't explain. Thanks, Nova, I said softly. As the stars stretched endlessly before us, the Hes felt as dangerous as ever. but for the first time it felt like we might stand a chance. Commander's Log 284. Timestamp 2838-0822. Cycle 268. The message came 3 hours ago. A transmission, ancient, haunting, from an artifact buried deep within the hazard exclusion zone. Awaken us, or perish. I've heard ominous warnings before, but this one feels different. This isn't a warning. It's a command. Nova is decoding the signal now. Meanwhile, the rogue faction has gone dark. No comms, no sightings. It doesn't take a strategist to guess what they're doing. Commander Cale Doran warned me about this. He called the artifact a beacon, a siren to draw something far worse than anything the Hez has thrown at us. He didn't lie about that. The question is, can I trust him to help stop it? The vigilant sentinel cut through the darkness, its sensors sweeping the void for signs of the rogue fleet. The artifact's signal pulsed faintly in the background, a rhythmic hum that burrowed into my thoughts. Nova, I said, breaking the silence. What's the status on that transmission? It's not just a message, she replied, her voice unusually serious. It's a key. The artifact is sending instructions to activate something, a dormant force buried deep in the Hez. A fleet? Possibly, she said. Or something worse. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the situation settling over me. Sirac's shuttle is docking, Nova said. Cale is already aboard. I frowned. I hope they don't kill each other before we even start. Sirac Velos and Cale Doran stood on opposite sides of the conference room, the tension between them palpable. This artifact is a threat to everyone, Sirac said, his tone clipped. It must be neutralized immediately. We agree on that, Cale replied, his cybernetic arm resting on the table. But your coalition doesn't have the firepower to stop what's coming. And you do? Sirac sneered. Enough! I snapped, stepping between them. If we don't work together, we're all dead. Now sit down and listen. Reluctantly, they complied. Nova's projection appeared at the center of the table, displaying the artifact and its surrounding data. The artifact is transmitting a signal into deep space, she explained. It's a call to something, an ancient force, likely alien, that once dominated this region. The rogue faction has activated the Ghost Fleet to destroy the artifact, but their methods will only escalate the situation. Why destroy it at all? Sirac asked. Why not shut it down? Because it won't let us, Nova said. The artifact is designed to self-destruct only if it detects an external threat. Any tampering risks activating whatever it's calling. Cale leaned forward. So what's your plan, Thorn? We disable it from the inside, I said. Nova will infiltrate its systems while we fend off the rogue fleet. If she succeeds, we can detonate the artifact safely without triggering its payload. Cale smirked. Risky. I like it. Sirac frowned. And if Nova fails? We don't let that happen, I said. The Sentinel arrived at the artifact's location hours later, its hull shimmering as it navigated the spatial anomalies surrounding the structure. The artifact was massive, a monolithic structure of shifting metals and glowing veins that pulsed with an unnatural rhythm. Multiple hostiles inbound, Nova reported. Rogue fleet detected. Battle stations, I ordered. The first wave hit us hard. The rogue ships came in fast, their weapons tearing through the void. The Sentinel's shields flared as plasma bolts struck, but we held our ground. Target their lead cruiser, I said, locking on to the largest vessel. The Sentinel's railguns roared, their kinetic slugs ripping through the cruiser's armor. It exploded in a brilliant flash, sending debris spiraling. Shields at 76%, Nova reported. Keep firing, I said. As the battle raged, Nova's voice cut through the chaos. I've accessed the artifact's perimeter systems, she said. Deploying infiltration drones now. Good. How long will it take? Too long, she replied. Just keep going, I said. Sirac's voice came over the comms. One of the rogue ships is breaking off, heading straight for the artifact. Kale's face appeared on another channel. I'll handle it. Cover me, Thorn. I hesitated for a moment before nodding. Go. Kale's modified frigate surged forward, its weapons blazing as it intercepted the rogue ship. The two vessels clashed violently, trading blows that lit up the void. Inside the Sentinel, Nova's drones reached the artifact's core. This structure is ancient, she said, her tone almost reverent. Its coding is unlike anything I've seen. Can you shut it down? I asked. Working on it, she said. But there's something else. What do you mean? The artifact's systems aren't just calling something. They're learning from us, adapting. My blood ran cold. Hurry. The rogue fleet pressed harder, their ships swarming like predators. The Sentinel's hull groaned under the strain, its shields flickering. Shields at 42%, Nova reported. Divert power from non-essential systems, I said. That's everything but life support, she replied. Then strip it down, I said. The Sentinel surged forward, its weapons firing relentlessly. Sirac's ships joined the fray, their coordinated attacks crippling several rogue vessels. Nova's voice cut through the comms. I've reached the artifact's core, she said. Preparing to detonate. Do it, I said. There's a problem, she said. The artifact's failsafe is overriding my commands. It's fighting back. What do you need? I asked. Time, she said. And you need to get clear. I shook my head. Not happening. Aiden, she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. If you stay, you won't survive. I didn't come here to survive, I said. The Sentinel's hull shuddered as the battle reached its climax. Kale's frigate collided with a rogue cruiser, both ships erupting in a fiery explosion. Sirac's voice crackled over the comms. Thorn, we're losing ships. We can't hold much longer. Hold the line, I said, my voice firm. Inside the artifact, Nova's drones completed their task. I've overridden the failsafe, she said. Detonation sequence initiated. Good, I said. Aiden, she said, her voice wavering. I'm staying. My chest tightened. What? I can't ensure the sequence completes remotely, she said. This is the only way. No, I said. There has to be another way. There isn't, she said. I clenched my fists, my mind racing. You've done enough, she said. Let me finish this. The Sentinel drifted away from the artifact, its engines straining as the remaining rogue ships pursued. The artifact began to glow brighter, its structure trembling as the detonation sequence reached its peak. Aiden, Nova said, her voice barely a whisper. Thank you. The artifact exploded, a blinding light consuming the void. When the light faded, the rogue fleet was gone, their ships vaporized by the blast. The Sentinel was heavily damaged, its systems barely functional. I sat in the wrecked command chair, my vision blurry. Nova? I whispered. For a moment, there was silence. Then her voice crackled through the speakers. We're not done yet, she said. A weak smile crossed my face. Good. As the stars stretched out before me, I knew one thing for certain. The Hez was still dangerous, but as long as the Sentinel stood, it had a guardian.